So, Spectre of a Gun was a very special episode of Arrow, and of course, Guggenheim and the creators of Arrow had said it was going to be because it was a topical episode of Arrow, and it dealt with the issue of gun control. And my whole, idea going into this, my whole thought process was, I wasn't worrying about how they dealt with the issue as much. I was more worrying about, is this episode going to be an entertaining episode of Arrow? And it did end up being an entertaining episode of Arrow. Spectre of a Gun did, and it also ended up being a great opener to the topic of gun control. And I was surprised at how maturely the topic was handled and how well written this episode was. So basically, the episode starts off by Thea coming back into the fold. She's in the elevator with Oliver, and she basically, right off the bat, tells Oliver that she's disgusted that he's with Susan. And I love that about Thea's character. She's brash, she's independent, and she's come so long since season 4. And her arc's been so much better this season. And I actually think it was a benefit to have her be away for a while, so now we can appreciate, how great the character is now that she's back into the fold or the team. So she's with Oliver in the elevator, and she tells him that, and they go and are talking in his office. But then the shooter comes in, and he avoids all the cameras, and he starts unloading on Oliver's staff. Rene gets a shot off at him, but he's wearing a vest, so of course he escapes. So Oliver, after he figures out that this shooter may have got his gun from the Berlantis, tells Adrian Chase about this, who had been shot and in the office shooting, and he basically says there might be a connection there. So Oliver hunts down this guy who works for the Berlantis, shoots them, but then Vigilante follows him. Of course, we know that's Chase because he told him, and murders this guy. And a lot of people, the Chase cameo is sort of topic of debate with this episode. People are like, it's like a 5-second Vigilante cameo, why is he here? But I think it's here to show the worst that could. So back at the Arrow Cave, there's sort of this debate that arises over, should people have guns, should people not? Of course, Curtis is on the side of people should not have firearms, and Renee's on the side that yes, people should have them to defend themselves. And it was actually handled in a pretty good way. And Felicity's sort of in the middle ground. She doesn't know what to do. But after this scene, Oliver's back in the mayor's office, and Quentin tells him something that's very important and very awesome. He basically says, you need to address this issue as a mayor, not as the Green Arrow. And Oliver, it sort of sinks in that he's got to, handle this whole entire situation as mayor. And he invites the person who had shot down the gun legislation from the previous mayor's office in, and basically tells them, you need to sit down until we can figure something out. So they have a meeting. It's not shown, but eventually the team figures out that the shooter is actually going to shoot up a hospital through process of elimination and through tracking him. And so Oliver goes to the hospital, and he talks down this shooter in this extremely emotional scene. And I was surprised how well they did this shooting scene. This guy, you could tell he was troubled, he was upset, he had lost his family to firearms, and that's the reason he was making the city pay. But just to see Stephen Amell's performance showing Oliver talking him down was phenomenal. It was very entertaining, and it was sort of had me at the edge of my seat throughout the whole entire hospital scene. But eventually Oliver talks him down, and the police surround this guy and take him out. And Oliver gets the new gun legislation passed through by the help of Rene, who of course adds it. But it's sort of vague at the solution of the gun legislation at the end. But at the end, there's this vigil for the fallen, and Oliver gives this amazing speech, and it's really well done. It's an amazing scene. What I haven't mentioned yet in this episode is Rene actually gets a backstory. We get the backstory of Wild Dog. And it really fits good into this plot because it involves weapons and firearms as well. So we figure out that Rene was married and had a daughter, and his wife used drugs. And he came home from a game. He had figured out his wife was doing drugs and told her to get rid of them, or else when he got back, they weren't going to be around, him and his daughter. So he comes back from this hockey game and in the Glades, and basically his wife is being held hostage by somebody who she owes drug money to. So Rene basically tries to grab his firearm to shoot this guy and save his wife and his kid. So he grabs the firearm, shoots the guy, but in the end, a stray bullet from this drug dealer kills his wife. But he feels guilt, and he feels like if he would have had a gun sooner or a gun on him, he could have saved his wife. And that's sort of the reason why he's so pro-gun in this episode, and he's so against the gun legislation that Oliver's trying to pass. But we also see the next scene, which was wonderfully done. We get to see Rene losing his daughter to CPS, and he's banging on this table. We could tell he's frustrated, and says this is a very emotionally heavy scene. And basically, whenever he lost his daughter and then saw Damien Dark die on TV to the Green Arrow, he decided to don the hockey mask and the jersey and become Wild Dog. And it's this very well done scene. And really, the coolest thing at the end of the episode was the speck of hope and the nice civilian plot that we get introduced to, where Curtis says, "Hey, I'm going to help you get back your daughter." And it was amazing to see that, because this whole episode was about people with different beliefs coming together and getting stuff done, and I really loved that about Spectre of a Gun. I loved Renee's backstory. It was very heartwarming, and it was very saddening, and it was very deep, surprisingly, and it added a lot of depth to Wild Dog's character. I love the grounded story. It was the most realistic story we've had on Arrow in a long time. This was just a shooter who, decided to shoot up different places in the city. There was no metahumans. There was no vigilantes. It was just this guy who was shooting up places because he was upset that his family had died because of guns. We had phenomenal dialogue talking about politics that wasn't over the top 90% of the time. There may have been a few lines that Curtis had said that were over the top, but for the most part, Spectre of a Gun really handled itself well as far as dialogue. I loved Oliver dealing with an issue as mayor, and I love the vague resolution. And it's weird because a lot of the people who reviewed Spectre of a Gun hated the vague resolution. They said, why wasn't he completely pro-gun control, or the other way around? And I actually think that the vague way that the episode handled the issue, especially the law that was passed at the end, was great, because this whole episode wasn't meant to give a definitive response or solution to the gun control problem. It was just an episode that was meant to introduce the problem in a way to millions of viewers who hadn't really thought about it, or didn't come to originally to hear about it, and to present that in an interesting way. And I really feel like Spectre of a Gun did that. And all of these things combined just provided a wonderful story and a wonderful 45-minute session. So in the end, I have to give Spectre of a Gun a 9.0 out of 10. It was definitely one of the best episodes of Arrow to date, and one of the best episodes of Arrow this season. And it was definitely groundbreaking, and I hope that the way Arrow handled this topic will reverberate through the other CW shows, so that whenever they handle topics, they can do it in very tasteful and entertaining ways. So again, I give Spectre of a Gun a 9.0 out of 10. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Remember to like and subscribe for more. This has been Jonesy from Joneser TV, signing off.